Hi, and welcome to the first in our three-part series on the SRA's recent workplace culture thematic review. I'm here today with my brilliant partner, Emma Bartlett. I'm Beth Hale. I'm a partner at CM Murray, and we are a specialist employment and partnership law firm. And we're going to focus on this review that the SRA have published in the last week around culture and culture in law firms and what firms should be focusing on in order to improve and maintain a sort of good working culture. And what Emma and I are going to be focusing on today is mental health and well-being in the workplace and what the SRA has to say about that. So I'm just going to start, Emma, just by asking you to give us a sort of summary of what the SRA have done and how they've done it and what their sort of key points are.
Oh, thank you. Hi, Beth. So 8th of February, the SRA published its workplace cultural thematic review, which followed a survey undertaken by a number of solicitors and stakeholders. Roughly 3/4 of respondents to the review found that they were working in a broadly positive environment, but which left, unfortunately, 25% who had some concerns and issues regarding working long hours, levels of stress and pressure, focusing on financial targets rather than focusing on achievements in the workplace, and unfortunately anxiety around mental health issues and reporting those, and bullying behaviour. So there was roughly 1/4 of the respondents saying that there were some issues which need to be addressed. And a really helpful part of the review is there is guidance in here from the SRA on how to approach well-being in the workplace and how firms can do more. I was really interested in reading about this, the focus on reporting issues and how that can itself be a blocker before the law firms. And there are some analogies between this, where they're talking about acceptable behaviours themselves, including bullying and harassment, with the relatively recent report from the Equality Human Rights Commission on reporting sexual harassment in the workplace. So both of these have some really useful guidance and tools.
So I think one of the things that sort of grabbed my attention from it is this sort of what they focus on is that need to balance well-being with commercial requirements, and that is obviously really important, isn't it? In any organisation, you're running a business, so you've got to deal with, and in a law firm, you've got your client demands. Obviously, your people are your key asset, and so you've got to focus on their well-being and ensure that they are able to do their job, and be happy, essentially. So I just wonder what the sort of key things that the SRA are suggesting, or what focus law firms should be making on those kinds of points.
The key themes identified in the review included the importance of creating a safe environment for staff to speak up, value being placed on employees on support, provided with support from their line managers and colleagues, need to balance well-being with commercial requirements, importance of engaging and involving employees in decisions, and the benefits and challenges of remote working and the effect on trust. So just focusing on some of those, if we look at reporting out of this report, and as I said, there are some analogies to be drawn between this and the EHRC survey, was that there was possibly a lack of confidence in how to report or knowing how to report, and understanding that any complaints that were going to be raised would be treated seriously. And so recommendations in that regard are to have multiple reporting channels, more than just one, and in respect of those reporting channels, have anybody who's involved in the process properly trained in being that first point of contact for somebody who is expressing concerns. So reporting channels could be via their line manager, if it's an individual, an employee who's reporting into somebody, and it could be made informally or formally, and you would expect the line manager to know how to deal with that report, whether it's made informally or formally, and not to just sweep it under the carpet or move on to the next discussion point and not really acknowledge that a genuine concern has been raised, irrespective of whether the manager might agree with it or not.
There's also isn't there a point there around sort of managers when reports are made, or just more generally as well, just recognising what the signs are, being trained and understanding what the signs are of poor mental health, and stepping in where they can if they spot that. I think that's also quite an important thing for managers.
So mental health in itself, I feel in the legal sector is something which is now talks about much more, certainly in the last 5 years, than it's ever been within law firms. And we've had some brilliant mental health role models come out and talk about how their mental health has impacted their career, and how the most important thing that assisted them in recovering from mental health and continuing to have, if they chose to do so, a successful career within the law, was to have the support of colleagues and to feel that it was okay to talk about it, and then have the support of the firm. And one of the things that most law firms now have is they have trained some mental health champions or mental health first aiders. So even if the manager doesn't know how to respond to somebody who is expressing concern about mental health, he can signpost them to people who can, whether that's somebody in HR or one of these mental health first aiders within the workplace. We all come up the same route through having worked as associates, trainees and associates, and then moving up through your career path, and then you suddenly find yourself in a position as a manager, and you need to have the firm have given you the tools to then manage effectively, and that's really important. And to a certain extent, that can often be missed. So ensuring that those persons with first point of contact for anybody is able to deal with it. We're not expecting people to be act as counsellors at all. It's just knowing how to signpost people, and also for the firm to have it. One of the things that has been talked about, and has been talked about for quite a long time, but to actually have a wellbeing policy in place, and to engage your workforce in perhaps agreeing what the wellbeing strategy is, or what that wellbeing policy might say, is going to be really helpful for that policy to be an active policy.
Yeah, and I think that's become particularly important over the last couple of years, hasn't it? That, you know, as you spotting issues is harder remotely, definitely. And that's it's interesting to me that this has all come up. I mean, I think as a pure coincidence of timing, published almost at the same time as the Sue Gray report, or the preliminary report from Sue Gray, which raises a lot of the same issues around the importance of you know, management leading by example, speak up culture, you know, making long hours, you know, some very similar points being made, and it's, yeah, I think it's interesting that they've come out at such a similar time.
It's quite easy, isn't it, to blame blips in behaviour or drops in your well-being on, actually we're saying, but this is the environment that we work in, and surely this is it. You know, we are working long hours, we have stress, we're dealing with stressful subject matter, and this is my physical and mental reaction to working in that environment. But I don't think in any stretch in our day and age we should have to say, but well, that's it, that's just it, and not think that the firm has a responsibility to do more to support the individuals who are working in that environment.
There are external pressures on lawyers, aren't there? You've got client demands, but I think it's about the firm sort of managing that process and managing those demands and working with their staff. I think it's a balance, isn't it? But it's not always an easy one to strike.
So one of the other things that the SRA review talks about, obviously, is trying to understand what your own environment is actually like. And there are already many tools which firms can look at to measure whether they have a positive culture, or the positive culture that the firm is trying to engender, or whether there are problem areas within it. So undertaking some sort of cultural review is important. But as I said, a lot of the data is already there for firms to analyse, whether that's through exit interviews, through looking at grievances, or informal complaints that might have been made within the organisation, and trying to focus which are the problem areas for their business. It's really important.
That's all really interesting, Emma. Are there any other sort of key points before we finish on the sort of wellbeing side of things?
So one of the things that has come out of the report is, obviously, it's recognising that we are now working in a hybrid, or largely working in a hybrid working environment. So reminders are within the review that remote working will continue to have its challenges, and firms should not ignore the fact that just because people are back in the office from time to time, that the remote working is still something which firms have to focus on.
Yeah, I think remote working comes with sort of pros and cons, doesn't it? I mean, it definitely, I think a lot of people have found that it's been one of the sort of benefits of the last 2 years is actually establishing that remote working is doable and workable. But I think it also has drawbacks in terms of isolation and the difficulties people face in sort of having a good working environment in their own house, and that separation between work and home, I think, is much harder to establish if your commute only involves, you know, walking from your bed to your desk.
And one of the things that has come out both in the press and in this report is that obviously workplace bullying and harassment is something that's continued despite the change in our physical working environments. It's not just something which happens on a one-to-one basis or face-to-face basis. And a key message from the review is that bullying, where this is occurring, it will obviously cause long-term mental health issues, or short-term, but nevertheless it will cause some issues. And as you said right at the beginning, it's for law firm leaders to take this seriously and not necessarily back a bully, but to take some positive action in order to be seen to be taking these complaints seriously.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Emma. And that, as I say, that this is the first in a 3-part series, so there'll be more coming around speak up cultures and more sort of regulatory issues around supervision and support over the next couple of weeks. And do get in touch if you have any questions or thoughts. Thanks so much, Emma.
You're very welcome. Good to talk to you.